Hello students, I'm sorry that this pandemic has impacted our ability to chat today in person. My name is EUB104 Poed and I'm an Associate Professor within the School of Early Childhood and Inclusive Education at the Queensland University of Technology. I'm also a Principal Fellow at the University of Melbourne and I'm the Chair of the Association for Positive Behaviour Support Australia. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about my journey as a teacher to a teacher as a researcher. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which each of us have gathered. I wish to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also to acknowledge the contribution of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to education. I graduated as a secondary teacher in 1989, the last of Queensland's 3-year trained teachers educated at the Brisbane College of Advanced Education at Kelvin Grove, now known as QT. With the courage that comes from being 19 years of age and a life passion for becoming a teacher, I eagerly sought a position that was in the southeast corner of Queensland so that I could continue my sport as a competitive ice skater. As good fortune would have it, I was offered a part-time teaching position that was a 10-minute drive from my home. The school, Colby College, had been set up by Brisbane Catholic Education as a junior secondary school, and it was an experiment to see whether children with more complex disability could be educated in mainstream settings alongside their same-aged peers. So as such, it had an enrolment brief to accept all children from their local neighbourhood, regardless of their educational requirements. At the interview, I was asked whether I would not only be willing to teach the area in which I had majored, which was commerce, but whether I might also be willing to teach a small group of students numeracy, an area far different to the area in which I had minored, which was German. But desperate for a teaching position that allowed me to remain local, and as someone who had very much enjoyed mathematics at school, I of course said yes. On my first day, I drove to the school, nervously anticipating whether what I had learnt at college had adequately prepared me for the challenge ahead. I'd read everything that I could about the school, from local media stories about its opening 2 years earlier, to the information that was on the school's website. But what was missing was their commitment towards educating all learners and what this meant in practice. And as Jenkinson and Gow reported in 1989, Australian teacher pre-service education had limited emphasis on the movement then known as mainstreaming, despite warnings by people like Tony Shattuck in the late 70s that teachers working in mainstream would need to be trained in the education of students with disability. As I walked into my classroom on that first day, to say I was shocked was an understatement. In the room, there were 8 students, which many teachers might think is a dream-sized class. The teacher aide who was in the room introduced me to each of the students, and after the class, she gave me the medical background and diagnoses for each student. One student had cerebral palsy, another spina bifida. One student had Down syndrome, one had autism, one had fetal alcohol syndrome with an acquired brain injury and had experienced extreme trauma. One student had Tourette's, one had psychosis from her mental health condition, and the final student had an intellectual impairment that was diagnosed as severe. So apart from lived experience with family members with autism and mental health diagnoses, many of these labels were new to me, and I was left with 2 big questions. How do these diagnoses impact on the student's learning? And what should I do differently as a teacher? I'd worked at the school for around 2 weeks and I realised that I was really enjoying the role, but I still had a lot to learn. I decided while working part-time, it would be an ideal time to upgrade my 3-year qualification into what is now the standard 4 years. While struggling to meet the needs of one of the students at the school, at the time, one of my lecturers visited our school and conducted what I understand now to be a functional behavioural assessment. And he helped to identify the antecedent behaviour and the setting events that I could then manipulate to eliminate the triggers that were causing the behaviour. Without reservation, I can say that that support provided by that lecturer changed the trajectory of that child's education from one who was repeatedly suspended and on track for expulsion to one that graduated from Year 10 and went on to gainful employment in an industry in which he still works today. What that visit and my study did was game-changing for my career, and it reinforced for me how powerful research can be to improve our teaching. I learned at that point that understanding the function of a student's behaviour meant that I had a greater ability to impact their needs and to reduce that behaviour. And this insight shifted my focus from solely being a high school teacher to one that is committed to the education of all students, including those with disability, in inclusive school environments. So how has my research influenced classrooms, schools, and policy? As mentioned at the start, I am the chair of the Association for Positive Behaviour Support Australia, a not-for-profit company that is a network of the International Association for Positive Behaviour Support. Established in 2013, but significantly redesigned in 2019, APBSA aims to improve access to, scope, and fidelity of implementation of positive behaviour support across Australia. At present, we estimate that around 3,000 or 31% of Australian schools have been trained in PBS, many of whom I've provided that training. I recently co-authored a paper with Philip Whitefield from the University of Sydney, identifying the ways PBS has been implemented in Australian schools since 2005 and the future directions to enhance the scaled implementation, including how we can improve data and coaching systems, enhance teacher training, and the creation of national models for recognitions of schools that are implementing PBS with fidelity. Another project I'd like to describe is the Including the Excluded project, aimed at identifying whole school approaches to increase student engagement and promote positive climate. This project was completed in conjunction with Parkville College, a Victorian government special school that provides education for young people who are or have been detained in custody or held under order in secure welfare services due to mental health concerns. Parkville operates 52 weeks of the year and caters each day on average for approximately 300 of the most vulnerable students in the state. In discussion with the leadership team at Parkville's 5 diverse campuses, the school had invested a significant amount of professional learning into the 10 high-impact teaching strategies promoted by the Victorian Department of Education and Training, based on the work of Professor John Hattie. The HITs, as they are known, have been criticised by authors such as Prain and Teitler for providing simplistic advice to schools. While these 10 strategies emphasise instructional approaches, they don't offer any insights into how to achieve a positive climate for learning or on ways to improve students' connectedness. The leadership team at Parkville also expressed concern that the HITs start with an assumption that all students are engaged, which posits a challenge for those particularly working in youth justice, where many of the young people have been disengaged from formal education for some time. What the Parkville leadership team identified as a strength of their staff was their ability to re-engage students in education, but they had nothing formal to describe how their staff did this. I designed a participatory research project that employed focus group discussion as the methodological tool. And along with 2 leaders from Parkville College, we met with 67 Parkville educators, which is approximately a third of their workforce, for 10 2-hour moderated discussions across a 20-week period. What emerged from these discussions was then supported by a scoping review of the literature, and we developed what are known as the 10 high-impact engagement strategies. This high-impact engagement work is now being rolled out across 1 region in Victoria, with further conversations underway on adopting this as a statewide approach. A final research project I'd like to share with you is one I recently published, which was commissioned by the United Nations. So in 2016, member states of the United Nations endorsed 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 indicators designed to ensure a sustainable, inclusive, resilient future for the planet and for its people through economic growth, environmental protection and social inclusion. The UN called on authors to write an encyclopedia of the key terms used within the Sustainable Development Goals, with one chapter of the encyclopedia dedicated to goal number 4, quality education. As an invited author, I was given the opportunity to define the term equal access. Built on the principle of non-discrimination, equal access means that all societal members have equitable access to services and supports. Among other things, equal access leads to stronger societal participation, better healthcare, greater personal and professional mobility, access to employment, therefore and thereby increased wealth, improved decision-making capacity and greater voice, as well as increased autonomy. International frameworks have sought equal access and opportunity to quality learning experiences at all levels of the education system, specifically for students who are marginalised. The concept of equal access is grounded in principles of equity and is frequently likened to fairness or justice, which, when applied to education, aims to enable all individuals to have access to a wide range of educational experiences that are of high quality. What this chapter allowed me to do is to define a really important term used by educators to realise the goals of equal access to inclusive education. My choice of both research area and my publication outputs are informed by my deep commitment to systems change to address inequities in the education of students with disability. For me, public value, indeed the ability to transform systems that can make a difference in the educational experience of students with disability, is the ultimate indicator of the impact of my work as a teacher, as researcher. Thank you.